Good evening, Lord Jesus. Thank you for gathering us. Thank you for being with us. You are the light. Shine within us. You are the word. Sound within us. You are the door. Open to us. Open upon the vision of your love for us. And good evening to you all. I'm getting myself a bit scrambled. You know how to do that. Yesterday I was worried that I wouldn't have enough to fill out the days. Today I feel I don't have enough days to say it all. So let me say some of it very plainly, and then we will get to some consequences. I closed last night saying that Jesus' stepping into the play was God's Trojan horse. And I closed this morning with Jesus bowing out as he says, "It's done." What's done? The trick, the divine trick. The creator of the play is himself pouring into the play from every direction. We are not just invaded, we are surrounded and infiltrated. I think he intended to do this all along. He created man to play the part of God to the rest of creation. I think from the start, he knew it would be too hard for us. Then he came on stage pretending he was just going to show us how it should be done, a la Socrates. It sounded fine. Obviously, he should know how it should be done. But now we see that that was all a pretense to get himself into the scene, as if Hamlet would, insist on playing Hamlet in a repertory group. And look, speaking of Hamlet, look carefully at the love he is pouring into the world through that human heart of his. That's no image and likeness love. That's the real thing. That's divine love. It's not any longer just holding the creature in existence, but it's pouring out of the creature's heart right in the scene. This, the Actors Guild certainly, this is not fair. It was hard enough to play God when all that was asked was that we love all things with human love. Love it his way, but with human love. Who can possibly follow Jesus' act? What other human heart can love with divine love? Come with me now to an upper room where supper is in progress. And as they were eating, he took some bread, and when he had said the blessing, he broke it and gave it to them. "Take it," he said. "This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had returned thanks, he gave it to them, and all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood, the blood of the covenant, which is to be poured out for many." That's the trick. That's the infection and the start of the worldwide epidemic. Before he got himself killed and went back to his father, the Lord made sure to get inside a whole crowd of people. So he hasn't gone. And those human hearts aren't loving with just human love anymore. The role of being God to the world isn't any easier. What he showed us and told us was neither grand nor pleasant. Take up your cross and follow me. We're the disciples of a loser in this world. But the love welling up and out into the world is radically different. Grace is spread abroad on your lips. Thus God will bless you forever. It's a whole new ballgame with that. Suddenly the world is full not just of God's image and likenesses, playing God to the rest of the creation. Suddenly the world is full of God's own children, loving the world with God's own love. The infinite loving awareness could not be content with being the ground, the creator of the world. He finally just had to get into it and love it all from within the scene also. And even that, I'm told, involves an ulterior motive. He has infected us with divine life, made us sharers in his divinity, not just so we can love all things with divine love, but because he wants to have a big party after the show. We're all to go up to the penthouse, and it's to be, if you'll excuse the expression, a heaven of a bash. This play is getting really wild. That's my story of God. And I've shortened it with mercy. I hope I won't regret that. We are called to play God to the world, but since Holy Thursday, since Jesus gave us his body and blood to eat, it is no longer just human imitation of God's love. It is now divine love itself that wells up within us, no longer just creating us. God just couldn't be satisfied with that. He just couldn't keep out of it. He was not satisfied to just pour love into our being and hold us in existence. He had to pour out into the world through our hearts. Ever since he got us to eat the bread and drink the blood, that Holy Spirit of total love that surges between Father and Son is poured out in our hearts and pours out through our hearts into this world, if we will but let it. When I was home, I told Brother Pat, Father Pat, he's so recently Father Pat that and I worked with him so long, I keep calling him Brother. I told Father Pat it looked like the whole retreat was getting to be about love. He said, you'll have to tell them what that is. You'll have to define that. I can't define that. But I can tell you about some of my own inklings. I would say that from the time I entered Gethsemane, it was certainly almost like a koan question for almost the first 6 years of my time in the monastery. What's this charity? We've got a lot of charity, caritas, charity, And I knew a lot of human loves I knew the love of parents, brothers, sisters, love of a woman, love of children, love of love of my home, friends. I knew a lot of those. And I knew that it wasn't just those. And I kept trying to think, what is this? And then I was that way, still a dash of this in me. I decided it's to will the truth. A little philosophical. That's getting close, though. This was the first inkling. Wasn't the last word, but I was beginning to get some kind of a descriptive. I'll never get the last word. Some kind of a descriptive hook on it. And then I met this. I met this rabbit in the horse pasture. In Gethsemane, we could go out to the horse pasture, and I used to go out there and catch the sunrise a lot. And I haven't checked this, but apparently horses don't like daisies. So they eat everything else, and the daisies throve. And so the horse pasture was pure daisies. And you know how the horses cut a path just about that big through it. Well, one morning I walked out, and I found myself disputing the passage with this rabbit. And he's looking at me, and we both freeze, and he's looking at me, and I'm looking at him. And parenthetically, I don't like pets. I like animals, and I like animals not to be afraid of me. One time in Vina, I had blue jays I worked on them a bit when they were young, and they'd actually come and sit, they'd actually get under the chair when their parents were after them. So I like them not to be afraid of me, but I like them to be able to thumb their nose at me and take off. The main reason is self-interest. Every leash has two ends, and whether you got it in your hand or around your neck, you're stuck. So I wanted to say that, I like animals and I like this thing, but I don't want them. I'm not into cuddly. So at any rate, that's a long digression. He's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I don't know whether I did anything or not, but he turned around and he took off. And I felt my heart singing, "Run, rabbit, be a rabbit, be all the rabbit you can be." And I stopped, and I said, "That's caritas." Well, that's like caritas. I said at that time, that's caritas, and maybe it was. I don't think you can tell. But it's certainly the image of caritas, as you've been hearing all week. That was a further clue, anyway. And then finally, in the dusty doctrine of the supernatural order, the doctrine of grace, I arrived at the big difference. Maybe the final difference. I doubt that. I think I'll never catch up and fully define this caritas, this love. But the difference is that it is no longer just I who live in my heart, but Christ who lives in me. It is His love, divine love, that now courses through my heart to some degree, to the degree that I let it. I have no way of gauging that. I have no way of I have no sense of suggesting to anybody that you worry about that. I leave that to Him, and I just hope He is having His way with me more than it sometimes seems. But I just wanted to do that description of what we've been talking about so much for Brother Pratt's sake, divine love. I think now I want to use one more image. The gardener, the plants, and the water in the soil pushing up, and I think I have all the images we need. Because what I'm into now is how God operates, how this love love, love operates. The gardener plants his plants. The water is the image of God's love. There are a variety of plants. The water comes into the roots, and the water says, be whatever you're going to be. Be that. The water is in favor of them, and all the water does is just keep saying yes to the being that they are. I said earlier, one time earlier, pain. You know, if you see pain as evil, it's hard not to when it's your own or when it's somebody very close to you. But if you see pain as evil, then you've got a big problem with this created world. To my mind, evil is person destruction. And sin is doing that, encompassing that with your attitude, with, saying yes to that or saying no to person growing. And so in this analogy that I'm giving, the gardener, the plants, the water, well, the plants in the garden, each of those is a person growing, and the love of God, of the Creator, is pressing them on to fullness. I want to touch on a word we use. But first of all, person destruction, evil, is the one who rams back on that or tries to squeeze off the water supply, and somehow opposes the becoming of my plant, okay? There's a word that I find very tricky in our Catholic. Have you lately offended God? Very often the image of we anthropomorphize that image. Offend God, and you see him up there with a big surly pout. He's really put out at you. I think if you realize that behind this plant, within this plant is water, behind this person, within this person, is this pure, loving awareness saying to this person, be, have life, have it more abundantly, and you're somehow out there, whether it's even, could be to yourself, you're somehow out there saying, don't have life, don't be. You're smashing in, analogously, you're smashing in God's face. You're offending. You're on the offense. You're offending God. I don't think he goes away pouting. I think this is not trivial, because people are always up against a God who is offended. And usually when a person is offended, he's sitting over there, not waiting to heal you. He's waiting for an apology. So I think that the word is true, but the connotations, that's the way you offend God. You offend God by going against his love, trying to make everything be. And how does he respond to that? He just keeps loving and trying to make it to be. So evil is person destruction. This isn't working too good. I'm going to go to something else that I thought I might pass. I'm staying with, that's enough. I'm saying it's not working too good. It's enough. I want to talk about divine forgiveness, but I don't want to try that tonight in these terms. I want to go back to that supper. Jesus has been in the world at this point some 30-some years. And he's certainly seen the way it is. Certainly knows the situation. He's come up to Jerusalem. He knows he's about finished, that they're closing in on him. He also knows the depth of human misery. He institutes the Eucharist. And he goes out to the Garden of Gethsemane, and the man who has known the scene all along is suddenly crushed down, smashed, sweating blood. What's happening here? He's made us one with him. And I think that if you ponder it, the Eucharist and the agony in the garden are transparently related. That Jesus has taken us in. Now, some people don't like this. Years ago, I got in trouble with my theology professor for a similar sermon, so to speak, because they have a devotion to the Eucharist, which I want to respect, and I think it's correct, of consoling Jesus. So I come to communion and I console Jesus. And here's this guy telling him, you come to communion and you bring your sinful self to Jesus, and he takes you to the Garden of Gethsemane and experiences the weight of the sins of the world. And then, obviously, I'm into Gethsemane, obviously he then carries it all to Calvary and hangs it all on the cross in himself. He became one with us in the Eucharist. He stood up from the Eucharist, walked down to the Garden of Gethsemane, and was crushed right down to the ground. I think the Eucharist is our place to bring our broken selves to meet Christ. And if that aspect seems heavy to some of you, realize that's what he wants to do. If you want to console Christ, bring your sins and yourself to him. Let him take you into himself and enter into you, and then go up to Calvary with them. Well, this isn't working like the other ones. I'm going to, the next two will be more fully prepared. I apologize for this. I mean, it isn't working in one sense. I'm getting the thoughts across, but I'm going to I've been hovering around and trying to say something, saying it perhaps too ironically, that, and I'll say it tonight and then we'll close. We're talking about God's way of acting, and I said love. But there's something else in God's way of acting. He gives you, you'll hear it in the Old Testament in a pretty horrendous way at times. He gives you 2 strokes for one. It's like a sore loser. He cannot be outdone. And I suggested that in the Potter. So I was trying to suggest in the Potter that, and I like to suggest it with God. One day, as in Job, Satan was passing by, and he challenged God to a game of chess. And so Satan took the blacks, obviously, and God took the whites, and they started on. You can imagine it was quite a contest. It's going on forever. So Satan, God just kind of sits there smiling at Satan, smiling, and Satan does these endlessly clever moves. Takes his time, endlessly clever, and he looks like he's got God in an absolute, keeps doing this, absolute corner. And then God smiles and nods, and he comes up with something that, then it's obvious, but he just wipes Satan out. So Satan, and he smiles at Satan, Satan throws the board down, stomps out, but he always comes back for a rematch, okay? Now, the thing about that scene, God, I said he can't leave well enough alone, and he seems unable to bring things, he's a compulsively creative repairman. He can't just put it back working order. He has to say, for that, too, and he doubles up on everything, and the expression I'm going to use is where sin abounds, grace superabounds. And I take that as a promise. I've been trying to say something about this all week and slipping right past it every time. So now I'm saying it rather plainly, that God never just, there's something like it's an insult to him. If he says, let's do this, and it goes awry, he doesn't say, there, it's right. And that's because he isn't that kind. He isn't that violent kind. Back. He just keeps, if he's loving it and it goes off to the left, he keeps loving it. And somehow, it gets back on its right course, but comes out better than if it hadn't started out the wrong way. Better is his, that's his problem all the time. Better. He's got to do it always better. Never just back. That's characteristic. That's one of his biggest weaknesses. He just always insists on topping anything that doesn't go quite right. He brings it out better all the time. Now, I think I got good evidence of that in Paul's, where great sin abounds, grace superabounds. I want to talk about that when we talk about divine forgiveness.